Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
This one certainly has more questions than answers. Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, two Dutch students from the town of Amersfoort in the province of Utrecht, decided to go on an adventure to South America. Aged 21 and 22 respectively, the girls, who both worked at the local restaurant In de Kindenhap, which serves classical Dutch cuisine and, according to reviews, serves some lekker dishes. The facade is reminiscent of a small backstreet London eatery and is based on Langstraat. They saved up their wages for 6 months and set off for Panama on a 6-week backpacking tour of the country. The idea behind going there was for the pair to celebrate completing their studies. They were also passionate about learning Spanish and wanted to do something selfless to help the local people. They had planned to do some voluntary work with children. They arrived on the 15th of March 2014, and for the first 2 weeks of the trip, everything seemed normal and serene, and they would keep people home in the Netherlands updated via social media. They arrived in the small mountainous town of Boquete, which is situated in the province of Chicory, just off the border with Costa Rica. They were going to stay with a local family for the remainder of their trip, as this was the locale for their volunteer work the two had arranged. On the morning of April the 1st, they were reported to have met up with 2 Dutch males for food and were spotted eating with them not long before they departed, unguided up the El Pianistra trail. The draw of this particular jungle route is that due to the change in elevation, for half of the walk you will quite literally be amongst the clouds, and this is why the area is called the Cloud Forest. One of the effects of this, other than the obvious mist, is a constant raindrops falling from every leaf. The walk from start to return should take about 3 to 4 hours. Parts of the trail are carved through thick vegetation that creates narrow corridors to navigate with green walls either side. So the girls set off allegedly with the dog from the local restaurant called Blue, who would come along for the walk. The dog is never actually pictured in any of the photos taken, so this is unlikely to be completely true. It is said that it was actually Blue's return home without them later that day that began the early thoughts the girls were in trouble. We will cover many aspects, but the first thing that jumps out to me is that if they've just got lost, especially if either one or both were injured, how were they not found by the search parties? It seems highly unlikely to me that 2 European girls, one with bright orange hair, would not be immediately spotted. Also that they would deviate so far off the trail, especially with the early SOS calls. In most cases, phone data is vital to help solve or piece together how events unfolded. With the girls' phones and the information they contained, which was plentiful, you would think that this would be easy to figure out, yet it has only baffled investigators even more. After the 6th of April, there were many attempts to unlock Kremers' phone. All times before this were successful. This suggests that maybe Kris was incapacitated or deceased at this point. Was the person trying to access the phone Lisanne, who was still alive, or was it a third party? From the 7th to the 10th, without unlocking the iPhone, there were 77 attempts to call emergency services. This can be done on iPhones without unlocking the phone, and that facility was active in 2014. The sad thing is none of these attempts connected with a tower, and due to no signal, there was never actually a connection for any of these calls. With Lisanne's phone, the photos possibly extend the life of Kris by a few days. During a 3-hour period, although predominantly the first hour, in the early hours of the 8th, 90 pictures were taken using the camera's flash, possibly, in my opinion, to illuminate the area as it was pitch black, total darkness. All but one were pretty much of random scenery, the exception the strange photo of the back of Kremers' head. What is noticeable about this particular photo to me is how her hair is dry, when all the other photos show the conditions are wet. It is clearly raining. All theories point to Kremers being injured first, except for something that bothers me. That is the fact that the first distress call came from Kris's phone. It is highly unlikely that the injured person would be the first to do this. However, as the photos suggest, Lisanne is carrying the backpack and both phones, so she could have made the call, although she would have had to have known the code. So that raises another question. If the attempts after the sticks were made by Lisanne, how did she not access the phone? Also, the only injury we definitely know about was that of Lisanne's foot. So is it also possible that if this was an accident, it was in fact just as likely to be her who was injured first? The location of the nighttime photos, taken April the 8th, the last images captured by Lisanne, has never been released to the public, but is thought to be the second crossing of the Culebra River, which translates to Snake or Serpent River. They are unstable stretches of wire known as monkey bridges. The thing that stands out about this location, though, is that it is on the main trail, one that has been hiked by many searching for the girls. Also, the crossing is within 100 metres of inhabited huts, that of the Ngobi tribe. This of course does give another avenue of possibility, and were the girls in fact kidnapped? What further reinforces this is in 2020 a Panamanian indigenous tribe were found to be abducting people and sacrificing them in religious rituals. This was after the discovery of the bodies of 6 children and a pregnant woman in a mass grave. They had endured a brutal killing. This particular tribe had been influenced by an individual with extremist views, calling themselves God's New Light. They fashioned a church in the middle of the jungle and were raided by police. 10 were arrested and 15 captives were rescued, presumed to have been the next to be sacrificed. It was the day after the raid that the mass grave was discovered. The location of this particular sect rules them out of involvement in the Kremers Froon case. It does, though, show that the religious sacrifices cannot be ruled out. There have also been proven instances of organ harvesting in the area. I have seen people suggest cannibalism, but I cannot find any evidence of it ever occurring in the location. It also puzzles me that the ground search was not initiated until the morning of the 4th, some 65 hours after the girls went missing. To be fair, they were not informed until the late evening of the 2nd, so it would take emergency services until the next morning to start air searches, which they did, as they would have had to have waited until daylight. But why then wait another full day before sending in actual people to search the ground? It seems very slack to me. They also didn't utilise search dogs until the 9th. Now, this detail rarely gets reported on, but it seems very relevant to me, and that is the subsequent deaths of other people, even loosely connected to the girls, within such a short time frame, it is either sinister or a very weird coincidence. During the search efforts on April the 4th, 20-year-old Jorge Riviera Miranda, a friend of the tour guide's son, was found face down in shallow water. I found a local paper article online about it. It actually shocked me a bit to see his body and the scene, as I wasn't expecting it, although this does seem to be quite normal for newspapers in South America. It looked like he was put there post-mortem, as if he were dumped. The only other feasible explanation is intoxication and falling there, but what you can see behind him, that looks highly unlikely. His post-mortem revealed he had indeed died from drowning, but there was evidence of foul play found when they removed the body from the scene. Maybe the killer held him under the water here, or somewhere else, and then put him there. I'm not even sure if this was in the same district, but it was in Chicory. But I guess you are thinking, that's a little bit of a reach with the link to the girls. Well, what about on the same day, Osman Valenzuela, a 22-year-old gang member who had met the girls through their volunteering, and was even pictured swimming in the Caldera hot springs with Kris and Lisanne, was also found drowned. He went missing 3 days after the girls and was found a week later. The police found a photo of them all on Osman's phone. The other guy in the photo, Jose Manuel Murgas, was mowed down and killed in a hit and run less than a year later. The taxi driver that took them to the trail was also found drowned in March 2015. Other people have also gone missing, and pretty much all seem to have a link with Heriberto Gonzalez, a person of significant interest in the girls' case, and all of the above. He also had a public online argument with Edwin Aguirre. I will link that to the description below. If anyone can translate that and comment, that would be great. I found that on a website called imperfectplan.com, and I encourage anyone who wants more in-depth detail to go there and seek it out. It's been a fantastic source of information on this case, with multiple articles.
Also, Scarlett R of the Coup de Casse blogspot. Fantastic work, immense amount of detail collated. So check her out.
Others that raise suspicion are Feliciano Gonzalez, the local tour guide who found some of the remains. Also, his son Henry does raise some suspicion. Feliciano was also one of the last to see the girls alive. He was the guide who they failed to show up for on the morning of the 2nd. He searched the girls' room after they disappeared and then notified the police of their disappearance. Seems like a lot of involvement to me. Henry Gonzalez was also heard saying strange things whilst drunk about his encounter with the girls the day they went missing. The discovery of the remains, the nature in which they were found, is yet another strange detail. This consisted of a pelvis bone and a foot in a boot. Kris Kremers' bone fragments having essentially been bleached after being covered in phosphorus, the experts suggest that lime was used. All that was ever recovered of Kris was a section of her pelvis and a bottom rib bone. The theory of an animal attack, I have seen a lot to suggest this, although it's highly unlikely. However, the day of writing this, I have just seen an interesting point of view from a man who posted hours ago a comment on December the 27th, 2020. The man seemed to be convinced to the contrary, that this was indeed an attack by a big cat, the jaguar seeming to be his main culprit. The part of his post that aroused my interest was him noting that other attacks by mountain lions only normally leave the flesh that they could not get out of the footwear. This would indeed fit with how Lisanne's remains were found, but if there was animal involvement, which the science seems to disprove as there were no evidence of marks consistent with an animal attack on the fragments discovered, then this also could have occurred post-mortem. The official theory given by authorities is one of being dragged along the river and smashed up by the rocks. The issues with this are that the fragments that were found had no marks on them whatsoever, no scratches to indicate being dragged along the river, no evidence of clawing or teeth marks. Neither had evidence of any damage, the only difference being Lisanne's foot, which had unaltered bone marrow indicating it hadn't been in the water, as well as Lisanne's backpack that was found downstream 3 months later, totally bone dry and mould free, with no damage to the contents. It was found on the edges of an unmapped village. To get there would mean trekking through deeper, uncharted jungle, and Lisanne's rucksack was not a specialised waterproof hiking bag. It was an inexpensive normal one, so it's not feasible this bag either went down the river or sat outside for much longer than the moment it was found. You would have thought there would be water damage if it had been in the river, or at least succumbed to moisture if they hadn't been in the river itself and just alongside the bank. The other striking thing about the items found was them having upwards of 50 different fingerprints on them, significant amounts on their phones. The contents also untouched seemed striking, as the electronics inside were in fine working order. The camera, both girls' phones, $83, which is the equivalent of a week's wages to a local, but to a tribe member, this could be upwards of 3 months' earnings. So for a blue bag to sit there with cash money, iPhone, Samsung phones, which is worth a year or two's money to these people, a Canon camera, it just doesn't seem likely to me, and it would have been found much sooner. Also, the river itself is slow moving that time of year, and drought was also affecting water levels at the time. People argue that the river could not have carried even a bag, let alone a body, at this time of year. When you also factor in other people's bones have been found while searching for the remains of the girls, you could see why someone would want to stop the increasing investigation and interest in the area. By leaving the items, was it just a ruse to appear as if it was merely an accident? The difference in rate of decomposition is extreme between the two. The remains found belonging to Kris Kremers had been bleached and had reached a level of decomposition you would expect after 2 years, not 2 months. and yet Lisanne's foot was found with skin and tissue and led experts to believe the possibility it may have been cooled in a fridge. I saw an article about another Dutch woman, Curtin Denise Hoodblad, who had also died in the jungle just across the border in Costa Rica back in 1999. She was found 3 weeks after her disappearance and was extremely decomposed. They could not determine exactly when she died. She was found sitting on rocks and had actually died of starvation, so to get to that point would have definitely cut into the 3-week gap that she was missing. So you could hazard a guess they found her more like 2 weeks after she died, yet extremely decomposed. So maybe it's possible in the climate of the jungle, maybe Lisanne's foot was protected or shaded because of the boot itself. It all seems very unlikely that they could have such different rates of decomposition without human intervention. The first emergency call attempt was within the first 3 hours of the trek. It makes no logical sense why during the 8 to 11 days that we know the girls' phones were used after they went missing, why the emergency calls or the use of the phones were restricted to such specific times each day until the 6th. It seems to be a sign of a window of opportunity which supports an abduction theory. Also, if they had survived for that long and were the ones in possession of the phones, why would they not leave or record messages or final pictures for their loved ones? It makes no sense. Maybe they did and these were also deleted. We know picture 509 was deleted, which was taken at a time when it all seemed to go wrong. One of the photos taken before this seems particularly unsettling. There is something very eerie about the photo. Kris looks unnatural, and there seems to be man-made trinkets or objects tied to trees around and above Kris's head. Her hands are behind her back. Is she posturing like this because she is ducking, or are her hands tied? Although people suggest it is strange to do this when ducking, I myself do the same. I get my long arms out of the way. Some people are convinced her hands are tied. It looks feasible, however the next photos show her totally unrestrained. She also looks quite content in the photos that precede it. Are they being led somewhere, with the person or persons behind Lisanne instructing them where to walk? That is unlikely, as the photo doesn't look as if it was taken in a manner where she is hiding what she is doing from a captive, although not particularly focused. Kris appears to effectively be under a crudely constructed roof of a small, makeshift hut or opening. It doesn't look like a natural formation. There are definite objects there, some sort of rock painting to the side, the red items above. Could it have possibly been some sort of trap, or just dead leaves? Again, that is all pure speculation. Another tragic detail comes from the diaries of Kris and Lisanne. On the day before they went on their fatal hike, they both commented that they had actually been told they had arrived a week earlier than they were supposed to. They had expected to start work the next day. So if it was not for that error, although it is unclear whose error that was, as the girls planned months in advance, and according to their diary entries, the Spanish school were just as puzzled as to why they could not start their volunteer placements. If work started as was meant to, they would not have had time to go on the trek that day. Some other little weird things amongst the evidence that bothered me was that the year was wrong on the camera. It had the correct day and month, however the year said 2013. I guess an easy mistake to make on the settings, but strange nonetheless. And then when looking at their Interpol pages, why did they list the girls as having disappeared at The Hague, or is this just where the file was lodged? I've looked through a lot of evidence in this case. There is some in Dutch that I cannot translate, as I no longer have a Dutch girlfriend. Strangely enough, she also lived in Amersfoort, although unlike Kris and Lisanne, who are very kind souls, she's an absolute evil sociopath. But regardless of that, it's not as easy as once was to understand what is written in Dutch. She could have actually been helpful to me for once. In conclusion, there is a lot to question in this case. For it to simply be two girls both falling down a cliff edge, a case of misadventure, It would not account for the strange phone activity, the time frame of the weird photos, the manner in which the remains were found, the fact that larger bones, especially the skulls, have never been found, the other deaths in a short time that are somehow linked, and the possibility of local or tribal involvement. These were intelligent girls, but I feel they maybe felt a false sense of security in their surroundings. To have gone on the trail without local guidance, lack of preparation, and even how they were dressed was a gross miscalculation of judgment. On the surface, a simple trail through the jungle, but that is to local people or experienced hikers. For novices, it is a very different scenario. Without incident and remaining on the correct path, it would have resulted in a very different outcome. However, something clearly occurred that changed that. We know that from the phone data, in particular attempts to reach emergency services. I must stress though that with everyone speculating to different theories, which is only natural when we don't have the answers, it is also a distinct possibility and cannot be ruled out that they just got lost in the jungle, lost their way and tragically could not get phone signal to raise an alarm for assistance. With an abundance of evidence, the fact we are still searching for answers today is astonishing and sadly a reflection of the failed investigation by local Panamanian police. I think they should speak to Feliciano Gonzalez. There is no doubt in my mind that he knows more than he's revealing about what really happened to the girls. His over-involvement in certain aspects of the case are too convenient. And while you're at it, have a word with Heriberto Gonzalez. No relation. But if I'm found face down in water, you know what's happened. I just want to sincerely thank such loyal subscribers. I cannot believe that you've remained for so long without me dropping any content. Unfortunately, had some real life shit to deal with. It's now past, it's now done, so we can just get back to regular scheduled programming. And I've got plenty of stuff coming, so thank you again for staying. Really appreciate it. I've also got some stuff coming up where I want your involvement, so stay tuned for that.
Even if they try, I ain't going. Keep my head up high, now we floating. I won't go, no, I won't fall. Right until I die, it's the only thing I know. I ain't going.